Cutting the gutter. Cutting the gutter, or cutting against the curb, is a critical step. Whether you are working in clay or stabilized material or finishing in gravel, if you make a mistake, it is easy to see. For anyone that wants to check the depth, it is easy to measure as well. When you are cutting the gutter on the final lift of gravel, it is what determines the depth of asphalt, at least along the curb. It has to be at least 30 years ago when Standard General fabricated a tool to help out with gutter cutting. At SG, they call it the shoe. You can basically bolt it on the edge of the grader's moldboard, and it skids on the top of the curb and guides the cut. In the upcoming video, I'm going to show you some photos of the shoe and explain it in greater detail. Now, I'm going to confess that I usually don't use the shoe to assist in gutter cutting. I just go freehand. I do think that it is a good tool, and if you like using it, well, you know what they say. If the shoe fits, wear it. Here is the first step to attaching the shoe to the moldboard. You basically take out two bolts that bolt on the end bit and bolt on the base of the shoe and torque it up, and you're ready to put on the rest of the shoe with a pin after that. I used this shoe when I worked with Braden Lupel and his crew. And Stephanie, who you see here, was my grade person at that time, and she was really good at attaching this thing, and she was good at adjusting it later on as well. This photo shows you the shoe attached to the base with a pin. On the top you can see the adjustment screw to set your depth. And on the bottom you can see the skid plate that'll skid along the top of the curb as you cut. Now here we are getting the street ready to accept 100 millimeters of asphalt. Now here I am cutting the gutter, what I call freehand. I'm not using the shoe here. And I've tried to rough this gutter in at about 80 millimeters. Don't forget, I'm looking for 100. But I tried to rough it in at about 80 so that I had a couple centimeters to cut as we're going along here. And what I'm doing is when I'm sitting in the grader here, I'm focusing on that bolt to try to hold on 100. And Rob has made himself a little stick out of some spare lath there, and he's just periodically giving it a check, just to make sure that I am cutting 100. And if I get a little bit out of whack, he'll let me know to come up a centimeter or down a centimeter. And there'll always be a little bit of cleanup when it comes to this process, because you see there's a little ridge of gravel that goes up onto the curb all the time. And so the crew will always have to come behind and get rid of that little ridge of gravel that comes up there and just clean up a wee bit behind me and fix any errors that I make. And yeah, that's basically what I'm doing, is focusing on that bolt and trying to hold on 100. Here we are going around the CB. If the CBs are pretty freshly poured, then you'd have to be really careful when you do that. This one was poured a few days prior, I think. So I want to show you, coming up here, I want to show you what happens when you put a little bit too much pressure against the curb. I'm always kind of gauging my pressure that I put against the curb by how much smoke is coming off the end of the blade there, you see. How much white smoke. But watch when I get a little carried away here and I put too much pressure on the curb. Now you see how a little bit of asphalt, a little bit of concrete come off of there? You want to try to avoid that. So ideally when you're doing this, you just want to tickle the curb. Just barely put a little bit of pressure on the curb. And that's ideal. Because if you put too much pressure on the curb, for one thing, it wears your blade out really fast. The edge of your blade will go away, you know, within a couple hours of cutting like this. So
a little bit lower. Okay.
now here we are cutting 100 mils again, and I want to talk about this freeze frame for a while. And I did a little bit of drawing on it. See where that red arrow that I drew right on the back of my moldboard there? That is the bolt that I'm talking about. That's where I focus when I'm cutting this gutter. I look at that nut there, and I know where it's going to line up on that curb, and I focus right on that to try to hold the proper depth. Now, you notice up in front of my grader tire there, I have written 80 millimeters at 3%. That is what I have set this street up to be. You see, when I roughed this in, I prepared for this cut that we're doing right now. So I roughed it in at I roughed the edge in at about 80 and the quarter crown at about 3%. Now, after the cut, you see behind Rob's foot there, I wrote 100 millimeters at 6%. Now, hopefully, when the cut is complete, that's what I achieve. 100 mils along the curb, and the quarter crown is roughed in at 6%. So it changes from 3% to 6%. And you have to do that. Otherwise, when you bone that quarter crown, you know, it's going to shoot. You don't want it to shoot low. So in order for a quarter crown to shoot okay when you bone it, because that's the next step, you have to get that quarter crown up a little bit so that there's just a slight cut on. Okay, on this freeze frame, I've written some reminders here that I'd like to talk about. There's 3 things that you need to focus on as you're doing this task. 1, focus on slight pressure on the curb. So, you know, if you can, just tickle that curb. 2, hold the correct depth at the curb. And 3, hold on 6% to rough in the quarter crown. So by watching your slope meter, of course, you're occasionally glancing over your slope meter to make sure that you're holding on 6% or about that. Otherwise, like I say, when you do the next step, when you measure this quarter crown, you don't want it to shoot low. Hopefully you won't get any fills on it. Hopefully you'll get little cuts on it. Now, here's a little tip that I do. If for some reason, as we're cutting along here, I don't quite achieve the 6%, then I'll keep that in mind. I'll look over at the curb and I'll look at a rock or something. I'll make a mental note of where that is. And when I'm done the cut here, I'll come back and repair that. See, because when you measure up this quarter crown, the finish quarter crown is going to be approximately 5%. So if you don't get the loose material in at least 6%, you're going to end up with fills when you go to measure that quarter crown, and you don't want that to happen. I mean, you can repair that too, but you don't want that to happen. So, like I say, if I don't quite achieve my 6%, I will make a mental note of where that is, and just come back after you're done. After you're done cutting the gutter, come back and repair that and get it up to 6%. And you know, by the way, this is one of the most difficult things you'll do with a grater. It's one of the most challenging things you can do with it. So if you get good at this, you've been practicing at it for decades. To create these videos, I am using footage that I shot on the job site last summer. If you find these videos helpful or interesting, please like and subscribe. If you have some input, please leave a comment below.